sodden snow of the Irish hills was born a Duatha's child, with a fighting heart and a mortal skill and a spirit fiery and wild. Through a prophecy he was bound and doomed to a short and notorious life, and he bore the name Sir Tantadil, a famous faithful knight. With his hurley in his hands, his name would cross the land. His uncle Connor, who wore the crown of Ulster on his head, in the home of Cullen the smith sat down for meat and mutton and bread. At the door lay the Coo, the faithful hound, a huge and terrible beast. When a thief or enemy trod his ground, their bones became his feast. Was the attempt to join them late at night, and the hound had leapt to shred. But he raised his hurley, poked them all right through the poor beast's head. He spoke remorse as the smithy cried for his lost and murdered hound. I will be your Coo now from this night till another you have found. So he lay outside the door when I watched him on the moors, and the name Cullen was sung out loud that night in a tale of rage and ruin and of might. And the name Cullen, so furious and wild, to remain in myth and memory, a legend of the Isle.
Cosyn tortar goedach, fwyl diagalú, fin scéal an chú. Cosyn tortar goedach, fwyl diagalú, corach lan a fiúnach, fin scéal an chú.
Cosyn tortar goedach, fwyl diagalú, fin scéal an chú. Cosyn tortar goedach, fwyl diagalú, corach lan a fiúnach, fin scéal an chú. Trained on the Isle of Skye and Shadow, bore an abandoned son, and met his battle brother Ferdiad. Many a tale they spun. Well, he fought with the strength of many men, a beast who bloodied the fields. In a bloodlust battle frenzy, his skin would shift and peel. His son would find him as a man, but would not tell his name. So he took a spear to his own child and doomed himself to shame. When the canny Queen Maeve attacked his land to steal the Bull of Brown, she sent out Ferdiad to fight. Cullen struck him down. Blood of son and brother fell. He wailed and cried farewell, and the name Cullen was sung out loud that night in a tale of rage and ruin and of might.
When the father of fair Emer refused to give her to wed, Cuchulainn tore his castle down and left the whole place dead. They loved each other, man and wife, despite his many affairs. And then he met the Morrigan, turned her down, and earned her vengeful glare. She weakened him and broke his strength with trickery and lies. By feeding him the flesh of dogs, 3 crones were her disguise. The Queen and Lugan saw their chance to fight the coup and win. When he battled next, 3 spears were thrown and one tore through his skin. So he tied himself to a mighty stone, by his guts and belt he hung. And so he still stood on his feet till the last breath left his lungs. And the light shone out so grand till the raven came to land. And the name Cuchulainn was sung out loud that night, in a tale of rage and ruin and of might. And the name Cuchulainn, so furious and wild, to remain in myth and memory, a legend of the Isle. Woo! Ooh, squeal and mock on cure.
Waha. Waha. Hey people. Welcome to the stream. It's me, your boy Kallen Revival, and today we're doing something a little bit different to the usual. Usually we're playing video games on here, but you know what? I feel like Sunday should be a chill day. I feel like Sunday should be a day where we don't do shit. Hey, Muzal, how's it going? If I sound completely defeated at that name, it's because I know exactly who you are. I'm just playing. How you doing? Today we're gonna. Sorry, chat. This is gonna be a fucking. This is gonna be a very targeted stream. I feel like. So a little bit about me is that I've been playing and doing tabletop RPGs for like years. I think at this point, I think it's been over 10 years at this point, right? And about halfway through that, I went, oh, damn. I can just make this shit myself, right? Because I got bored of systems not doing what I want them to do. So, I've made a couple, I've made a few. If you're on the Discord, you've probably seen ArrayCore and Project Anthurium, which are kind of the two that I've done that are actually good. We might end up touching those today. We probably won't. I want to do something different today. So let's get this open. But yeah, there's not going to be a whole lot to look at for this one. It's not going to be like a super flashy stream. But we're going to be building something effectively from scratch, and I will just talk through like basically like I'm thinking I'll just talk through like ideas about game design and how I think about things when I'm making a system. It's kind of like stuff to consider for DMs and players and all that kind of stuff. Full disclaimer, I do not have any sort of like professional experience doing this. It is all just hobby stuff. Pretty much entirely like my streaming, to be honest. But I have been doing it a long ass time. I've played a whole bunch of systems. I've done everything from D&D through to like Call of Cthulhu, GURPS, and even crazy shit like Eclipse Phase. Which I feel like the majority of people who watch this will go, the fuck is Eclipse Phase? I fully recommend you check it out. I do not recommend you play it. It's a very interesting thought experiment, right? As I understand it, it is a system that basically just goes, just, what is a power level? Who even cares? Let's just throw everything at the wall. Let's just go crazy. And it does. That system goes incredibly crazy, incredibly quick. But yeah, I've been a player a bunch of times, I've been a DM a bunch of times, so... Oh, thank you, Pretzel Rocks, that's... Also, I'm going to leave the music playing in the background. There we go. So it's not just like silence and me talking. And I'm going to skip this one though, because this was playing during the intro. Off we go. Sick. Alrighty, that's probably enough rambling. Let's get over to the proper stream bit. That is not the proper stream bit. Excuse me, let's turn that off. That's not meant to be there, hold on. Hold on chat, stream broke. Stream broke slightly. Okay, hold on, I need to re-add the fucking screen. No, we want it to be the other monitor. There we go. That is much too big. Cool, cool. Let's move it down. Yeah, we should probably have that behind chat. That would probably be a good idea, huh? There we go. I came prepared. Nah, I knew we'd have to do a bit of finagling. Alrighty, so... Alright, so what we're going to do, first off, is I'm going to make sure you can actually see what the fuck I'm doing. So, there's probably a bit of a misconception about what you actually need to be able to do this. All you need to do is be able to write down your ideas. That's like 90% of this shit. It helps if you can do something with graphic design, like make character sheets and stuff. You don't have to be able to do that. There's a bunch of different programs online that you can use to make character sheets. A lot of people weirdly recommend using like Excel and merging cells, right? So eventually, hold on, let me just show you what I mean. Oh, also I use OpenOffice, which is, it's got all the stuff that Word has, it's just open source. So it's free. But if we go format, merge cells, like just mix that into like one block, yeah? You can just type it, I know, there you go, we have ourselves a big booty bitches. You can just do whatever you need to do with that, but... whatever. Some people like to do that. It's not my preferred way of doing things. When I'm making character sheets, I tend to go into, where is he? Drawing. I'll do drawing, right? And I'll just lay out what I need in rectangles. Like I'll plot out areas and stuff, and then break those into smaller things. And eventually you end up with a character sheet that's actually, you know, usable. Let me see if I can find one for you real quick. What the fuck is everything? Hold on. There should be something in Office character sheets. Yeah, there we go. And eventually you end up with something that's, you know, actually usable. I was like, this is fine for like your kind of homebrew games. This is fine for anything that's not like commercial. It doesn't need to look like the best thing in the world. Best part of any game character creation? Hell yeah, brother. It can be a bit of a headache. That's the thing. Like, because it's easy to overthink and be like, oh, I need all of this and I need all of this, and it's like, you really don't. It's all the character sheet is really is some boxes and some words, and you can make that with a drawing. You can make that in Word. It's like, it is something you can do. Do we have? I mean, this here, right? This is probably the toughest thing that I had to make on this sheet. And like, all it is it's 2 lines in a box, and then some placed like titles. Anyway, we're getting real off track here. Okay, so we don't need this yet. We will probably need this later. Okay, so step one of doing this shit. Generally speaking, you need to figure out what you actually want your system to do. Because there's a whole bunch of different systems, and they all do different things. And I'm gonna blow your minds real quick, right? So, Dungeons and Dragons, like the most popular role-playing game, right? Is primarily a combat system. And that sounds crazy today. It's like that sounds insane. Most people probably aren't playing it to get deep into the combat. Like, some people are. Some people absolutely are. But I think the vast majority of people are more casual at this stage. I mean, look at... If you compare 3.5, D&D 3rd edition with some extra bits that makes it different enough from 3rd edition to be its own thing, right? If you compare that to 5th edition, 5th edition is a lot more streamlined. There's a lot less mechanical complexity to it. There are a lot fewer options you can take. The counter to that is that a lot of the options are more effective. Like, if you've ever looked through the 3.5 feats list, for example, it is massive. There must be thousands of feats you can take in 3.5, and that's not even including, like, homebrew stuff. Whereas 5th edition, yeah, there's still a lot, but there's nowhere near as many. But they're all a lot more... Because of that, they're all a lot more individual. Like, a 3.5 character might need... They might need, like, 5 feats all in combat to be able to do what they want to do at, like, baseline level, right? Whereas in 5th edition, each individual feat is doing a lot more work, so you only need, like, 1 or 2. Play D&D multiple times, definitely more RPing than the actual combat. Yeah, like, combat comes up, but the focus is more on... For a lot of people, the focus is more on, oh, this is my character, and you've got, like... I think they even address this with, like, the design of the game, right? They added in flaws and bonds and all that kind of stuff. Which, actually, I don't hate it. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's a quick way for people to make characters that have some level of emotional depth. But D&D primarily, it definitely first came about as a combat system, and even to this day I would argue that it's a lot more of a combat system than anything else. Primarily because of its heritage, but also kind of because it's how it's made up. If you compare it to another system, like, off the top of my head, Fate is a good example. Fate still has combat rules, but a lot more of the main book is dedicated to how you make your character having a fulfilling narrative arcs and stuff, and then combat is there, and yeah, it's a bit more complex than, like, the rest of the stuff in the system. Yeah, it's a bit more granular, there's some more mechanics to it. That's kind of just the nature of combat. The bottom line is, Fate as a system has a lot more emphasis on making, like, story happen for your character, whereas D&D is more... It more or less puts the story in the DM's hands, and then goes, here's all the rules you need to make the fights you're going to go into work. There's something like a sliding scale between that. I mean, what's the most combat-heavy system I can think of? What is the most combat-heavy system I can think of, actually? Yeah, the early editions of D&D were really If you never play 2nd edition D&D, count yourself lucky. That is a mess of a system. Guess it also depends on how the group wants to play it too. Yeah, there is that. And arguably, well, you can make the argument that any system can be run in any sort of way. Cyberpunk Red? I've not actually looked into Cyberpunk Red. It's not one that I'm particularly familiar with. Although speaking of Cyberpunk, actually, Shadowrun does have some pretty deep combat rules. Actually, Shadowrun's really funny as a system. I've seen it described as a system that if you examine any of the individual pieces that make it work, right, it just should not work. But somehow, all of it in that one book together, somehow just it just does work. It's kind of like some weird chimera that we just don't understand. It starts off fine, where it's like, oh, hey, dice pool system. It's like, okay, cool, we like dice pool, that's alright. And then, the further you go into this book, and this book is like... Hold on, I need to go and get my copy of it. There we go. My chunky boy. Also, I want to ask, can you all hear the music okay? Like, is that coming through at all, or is it just like... just a little bit? Do we want it louder? I don't want to feel like I'm fighting the music, but I do want you guys to be able to hear it. Turn that shit up, you got it. More or less. Yeah? Sick. Alright, yeah, so the Shadowrun book, all told, is... Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's 476 pages. One, two, three, 4, 5. Yeah, and 6 of those pages are just index. Of just combat? Nah, it's how much of this is hold on. So we've got combat, which ranges from... what is that? Page 154 through to 210. So that's 56 pages of combat. But then we get the Matrix, which is essentially that's like your hacking and shit, which is a really big deal in Shadowrun, and that goes from 214 through to 260. So that's another 46 pages. Which is also its own separate bespoke system, which also does combat, but it doesn't overlap with the combat that already exists. So you've got 100 pages, give or take, of 2 separate combat systems. And then there's magic. Which is another, give or take, 50 pages. But magic, I believe magic can bleed over into combat and into the Matrix as well. Yeah, Shadowrun's a system. Also, I want to point out, part of the combat, right? Where is it? Yeah, Shadowrun gives 2 full pages on firing modes for fucking ranged weapons. Like, they went so in depth with this shit, they did not need to. Separate, like, in and out of combat. Yes. So it covers magic both in and out of combat, it covers, using the Matrix in and out of combat. Which, I get it. But there's so much. Oh my god. Who can memorize 50 pages of rules on combat? I can't. Actually, I think this brings us to another really good point about, like, making a system, right? Is that the assumption is that, like, oh, you're making a system and, like, you kind of think of these big books, like, you think about, like, the D&D, and I'm going to keep referring to D&D because it's just such a useful touchstone, because pretty much anybody who watches this stream will have played D&D. Like, they will have played 5th edition exactly. And it's like, just looking at, like, the main book of that, it's like, oh, that's like 300 pages. Like, that's a big thing. You're making one of those? And the answer is almost always, no, I'm not making one of those. The shit that I'm making is way smaller. We'll be lucky if we hit 50 pages. Like, actually, hold on. I was helping streamer Hard Like Joe with a system that he's making, which is currently sat at 46 pages. It's very much a work in progress. It is not. It is not done. Where are we with Anthurium? 16-1? Please hoping I don't accidentally dox myself here. Yeah, this is 68 pages. And that's pretty much done. Well, there's stuff that I want to change about Anthurium, but we're not gonna bother that. Chrysanthemum didn't come to anything. Ophrys is still in development. Where's the other one? Where's a Raycore at? Oh, I know where a Raycore is. Yeah, we're not going there. I think a Raycore came out to like 30 pages. So, the bottom line is, like, all these are maybe, like, the middle of, like, maybe the, mid, below 100. But yeah, you absolutely do not need to be, like, making these huge fucking tomes. I know a lot of it is eaten up with lore as well, to be fair, in these big books, but yeah, it's a lot. It's a far smaller project than a lot of people kind of anticipate. Tomes are cool. I agree. Tomes are cool, but when it comes to actually writing shit, like, I think a lot of people should probably understand what you're writing is going to be a lot closer in size to, like, a splat book, right? Or, it's going to be closer in size to side content. You shouldn't be shooting for, like, these massive 300-page, 400-page kind of books. because it's just not feasible if you want to finish it in any length of time less than a decade. I know I want to... I vaguely added lore to Anthurium. I want to add lore to Ophrys, which is the system I'm currently working on, but I've not touched it in half minute chat. But yeah, the other thing is, like, you don't have to do that as well. You do not need to have... If you have an idea about the kind of game that you want to make, but you don't have, like, a story to put with it or a world to put with it, that's absolutely fine. You can just make pure mechanics. Or if you want to make a system based on something that already exists, but you don't want to spend the time retracing ground for something that you may not necessarily own the rights to, or anything like that. You can just make a system, just make a set of rules, and that is fine. That's pretty much what we're going to be doing today. We're not going to be doing... Well, I'm not planning on doing lore stuff. We might end up doing lore stuff. Because I have a very specific idea on what I want to do. So, yeah, you don't have to be making, like, these huge books. It's fine to just make, a rule set. There's a lot of rule sets out there that are just, like, one-page rule sets. God, what's it called? It's called, like, Love and Lasers in Space or something. Oh, actually no, there's a Left 4 Dead system that consists of exactly 2 stats. Combat and non-combat. It's actually a pretty clever system. What you do is both your stats have to add up. I believe they have to add up to 10. So you can put 5 in each stat, or you can put 3 in one and 7 in another, or whatever. And if you're doing something in combat, you have to roll under your score for combat. If you're doing something out of combat, you have to roll under your score for out of combat. It's a D10 system, so you just use a 10-sided dice. And that's it. That's the whole thing. Yeah, 2 stats. It keeps it simple. It keeps it fluid. We'll talk about number of stats later on, because that's a whole bag of worms to go into there. Alright, chat, I'm gonna skip this one, because it's kind of a sad one. Yikes. Yeah, it's kind of a yikes one. I'm talking about stats, I'm not talking about the song. So what Pretzel Rocks should be doing is it should be telling you guys the names of the songs as they're coming up. I'm noticing it's not doing that. It is. It's taking its sweet time about it. It's not doing it every time. But yeah, okie dokes. Right, let's actually do something. So, step 1 is we need to figure out what it do. So this is, what do we want our system to do? Yeah, I'm watching you, Pretzel Rocks. You do the thing. You give our man the credit he deserves. Alright, I want to change the font as well. Let's. There we go. Cool. So what we want our system to do. So this basically means, is it combat? Is it cohabit? Good enough. Is it story? Both? I mean, yes, any system will be both, to some degree. Pretty much. There are certain systems that aren't. Again, off the top of my head, the fucking Left 4 Dead one had absolutely zero lore with it. It was just, hey, here's the two stats, here's what you do, go. Most systems, though, will have some degree of story to them. It's like we were saying earlier, you've got all the lore and the tome kind of books. There's there's a balance of both in there. Although, what we really mean by this, right, isn't so much, oh, do we want our book to have a shit ton of combat or a shit ton of lore about the setting? When we say story, what we really mean is role-playing, right? So, helping the players to understand their... basically, like, the acting side of it. And, like, are we leaning into rewarding people for good acting and engaging with the story, or are we putting more things in for people who want to mess around with combat? Like, where's our focus lying with that? Or do we want to try and hit a middle of the road kind of thing? Alright, question 2. Who does it already? This one's pretty straightforward, although you do have to be responsible with this one, because it can very easily turn into plagiarism city, and of course we do not advocate that. We don't want to be, stealing or copying from other people. What this does is informing our future decisions. So, an example of this from Anthurium that I kind of carry across into... well, actually, not really. So, Anthurium uses magic in a fairly broad way. What happens in Anthurium, for those who haven't looked through the book or haven't played it, is that if you are a spellcaster of any variety, even if what you use isn't technically magic, if it's like, psychic powers or, whatever, or avatar-style bending or what have you, if it could be considered magical to us sat here in the normal human world, it falls under magic in Anthurium. And the way that it works is your spellcaster will have a domain, which consists of, it's a single word that describes what their magic is all about. Don't see a lot of inspiration points handed out when good puzzle solving RPing happens. It's not that big of a deal, all the players are rewarded in other ways. Yeah, inspiration points are... I'm not a big fan of inspiration points, I'll be honest. For me, they kind of take it... as a player, they take me out of the moment. Like, they're just kind of a really good reminder that I'm playing a game rather than, I'm this character and doing this thing. Obviously, that's not true for everyone. There'll be some people out there who are like, oh, I really like inspiration, and hey, more power to you. I'm not a fan of them, but I don't think they're a bad thing. They're just not my cup of tea. I think there's a difference between having DMs reward people for doing things in character or with the story, and the system itself being focused on that kind of thing to begin with. Because, like, one's based in just, like, human choices, like, at the table, and it's not something you need to... It's not something that you can account for. Like, it depends on the DM. Or the GM, I should say. Because DM is a copyrighted term. Thanks, Wizards. Ugh. Yeah, there's a reason you don't see the term DM in any books apart from D&D books, because it's literally a copyrighted term. If you use DM in your own system as a term, and Wizards catches wind of it, they can sue you. And bear in mind that they recently sent literal fucking Pinkerton agents to someone's house because they opened a box of Magic cards too soon. Yeah, Wizards have kind of not been doing the best in terms of PR recently. It's been... I mean, it's fine. It's fine. Most of the time, we just prefer to... we just say GM instead. Game Master instead of Dungeon Master. They're effectively synonyms. It's just one's copyrighted and one isn't. But yeah, to loop back, it depends on the DM. Like, if you've got a DM who isn't going to reward story decisions, it doesn't matter what system you put in front of them. Like, if that's just how they do things, then they're just going to keep doing those things no matter what. Similarly, if you've got a DM that's really into story and really rewards their players for going out of their way to do that kind of stuff, you will... It doesn't matter what system you put in front of them, they'll find ways to reward you for it. So, the point of, how do I put it? Like, that sounds a bit defeatist. It kind of leads to the question, oh, well, if it doesn't matter, then why bother making a story-based system? There's a few reasons. Accessibility is a big one. Like, I've always found it's easier to get new people into the game when they're not trying to... Like, there's only a small section of people who want to spend their time in a role-playing game, like digging through books and arbitrating rules and all that kind of stuff. They definitely exist. We hear about them all the time. We hear about bad guys all the time, people arguing over rules and so on. I tend to find those people are more comfortable playing a game like Warhammer 40k. And I don't mean the 40k RPs, I mean literal Warhammer 40k, like, just put them in a corner with a fucking battle force and let them go, right? Because there's a difference between making a tabletop role-playing game and making just a general tabletop game, but whatever. That's really in the weeds. We do not need to be talking about that. The point I'm trying to get to is, in terms of accessibility, it's a lot easier to get people who are kind of curious about D&D into D&D when you're not focusing on the rules, right? And like, there's a time and a place for them, don't get me wrong. You know, there's got to be some structure to the play, and that's what the rules are for. But you're going to do a lot better if you overlook, oh, well, that's not technically how that feat works, or that's not technically how, this part of the combat works. Yeah, you're going to be better off kind of ignoring that stuff, rather than being like, actually you can't do that because it says in the rules here that you can only do this on this turn, and yada yada yada. And like, ultimately, your goal should be you know, to have your players having fun. And if you've got a new player at the table, you want them to stick around. That's kind of the point. I mean, unless you're a dick. And again, we get those. We do get those. Inclusion matters. Yes. If you want the hobby to grow and flourish, then you absolutely need to be having new people coming into said hobby. Like, this is something that I just don't really understand about people who gatekeep things, right? It's like, surely you understand that by gatekeeping and keeping new people out of the hobby, you understand you're slowly killing it, right? Because eventually, you're going to run out of people to play with. If no one new is coming in, there are going to be people who drop out for whatever reason, because they don't have the time to commit to it, because they lose interest, because they find something better. Yeah. People stop doing things all the time for a whole bunch of reasons. So, you need new people to replace them. At least on, like, a kind of broad level. But if you're just like, oh no, new people, I don't want them in my game. It's like, well, who are you going to play with, buddy? Because the people you're playing with now aren't always going to be around. Also applies to players too. Their main characters should get at the moment equally. Yeah. Yeah, man. Like, that's related to another point later on. But yeah. Oh, the lore for 40k as well is, oh, Jesus, I was so into... Back when I was, like... Before I was doing role-playing games, actually. Like, back when I was, like, 15, I got into Warhammer 40k in a really big way. And it was a super big part of my life for so goddamn long. And I stopped playing and, like, keeping up with it a few years ago because I just didn't have anybody around to play it with. So, like, I still have a lot of my models. I still have the vast majority of my books from when I was playing. So, like, I could theoretically, like, wheel it out whenever I feel like and just be like, oh, hey, I'm gonna do this again. But, yeah, there's just no one around that I just don't have anyone around to play with. So it's like, oh, well, you know. But God, I'm big into it, man. Back when the Astra Militarum were the Imperial Guard. Anyway. No, 40k is cool. I am one of those people that's like, oh, I preferred it, like, back in the day. You know, it's not quite the rose-colored glasses thing, but fairly close. It's reminiscing. You've got me reminiscing, bro. You sly dog, you got me monologuing. Too bad that's all this stream is going to be, really. But no, I think 40k is something that has some very good rules. They weren't perfect. They weren't perfect, but they're pretty good. The big problem with 40k's rules is that they would put out, like, erratas and FAQs, right? So they would, that's, like, small rules changes, clarifications, all that kind of stuff. But this was back before we really had the days of, like, this was like back before we had PDFs and stuff, right? Yeah, I need to turn this one down. This is slightly too loud for me to concentrate with. There we go. I can't help it, he's going too hard. It's too sick. But yeah, this was back before we had, like, ebooks and stuff. And they didn't do a very good job of actually, putting those rules out. They would put them in a yearly, an annual, publication called Chapter Approved. And, it was kind of hard to get a hold of. Especially if you were, you know, like a 15-year-old kid who couldn't afford to buy fucking Chapter Approved every year. Oh dear. Well, that 40k made me stick around. What made me stick around with 40k? I really liked the setting. I really liked the game, like actually playing it. It was something that I got. It might have just been a case of. It might have just been a case of big fish, small pond, right? But I felt like I got pretty good at it pretty quick. But yeah, kind of embarrassingly, it was also, I was one of those people, and bear in mind, I was a fucking teenager, but I was one of those people who kind of made it my personality as well. Oh god. Yeah, young Kallen's entire personality was, I'm Kallen and I like Warhammer. Oh dear. To be fair, a lot of my friends liked it as well. We've all been there for, you know, I appreciate it. I'm just glad you're not blasting air horns at me or something. Just to make fun of me. Because that's what I'd be doing. Not air horning me out of respect. Surprising. Surprising. Not this time. Anyway, reminiscing about 40k aside. So, we figure out what we want to do. We figure out who's already doing it. And we use that to... Basically, we want to get a few of these, right? We want to get a few people who are doing the thing that we want to do. And we want to compare them. We want to see what makes them tick in the context of their own wider systems. And basically try and find a through line, right? And after that, it's pretty straightforward. How can we do it? And from there we'll be looking at, not best practices, best methods. We want to look at the foundations, which is basically, once we've figured out what we're doing and who else is doing it, we want to figure out the best way of communicating that as an idea. Or the best mechanics we can create to make that thing happen in the way that we want it to happen, right? And this will probably make more sense once I throw some more concrete examples at you. But once we've figured out that, then we can go, okay, what kind of groundwork do we need to make to support this? You don't have to do it this way. You can start off with the foundation. And the foundations are just, like, the core of the system, like, the very, very basics. In terms of D&D, this is, okay, well, we're rolling a d20 and adding skill points. And that has to get over a certain number to be successful. Like, that's what we mean when we're talking about foundations. We were talking about the very baseline of what are the parts that need to move to make this happen. And then after that, we can go, what else can we add? What do we need? So, we might have a single idea in mind, but most of the time that's not enough for a whole system. So, what do we need to support it? Do we need... So, physical aptitude, so just... What are people good at? You know, physically, right? We can look at, like, mental... Yeah, these are fairly self-explanatory, it's just... Yeah. Are you good at running? Are you good at jumping? Yada yada yada. Are you good at thinking? Are you good at speaking? So on and so on. You know, Kobat. Kobat? Kobat. Kobat. Magic slash... Not magic. Like, it's reductive, and I know some people would get upset with this, but hear me out, right? Most of these systems, and most fantasy and sci-fi, has exactly two kinds of people. Magical and not magical, right? In fantasy, it's a lot more straight cut, because you'll have non-magical people, and magical people. People that can cast magic, people who can't. You might have a few different kinds of magic. You know, a common trope is you have people who can cast magic and then people who can cast an older and far more advanced form of magic. The elder magics, or yada yada yada. But at the end of the day, you have magicians, you have non-magicians. In sci-fi, especially soft sci-fi. You don't see this very much in hard sci-fi. But in soft sci-fi and space operas, you will find people who may as well be casting magic. Actually, talking about 40k for a second, 40k is really funny because it has literal fucking space magic. And then it also has, well, it's not magic, but it's so advanced it may as well be. Right? Space magic. Oh boy, I get to talk about psychers. So, 40k is really fucking funny. In 40k, you have psychers, who are, for all intents and purposes, fucking wizards. However, in 40k, your space magic comes from something called the warp. The warp is basically hell. It is a physical manifestation of every emotion ever felt by anything alive. It's where literal demons live. It's also how they do their fast and light travel, but we won't talk about that right now. All you need to know is that 40k space wizards, which come in a wide variety across a whole bunch of different races, draw their power from the warp, which is space hell. In doing so, it is very dangerous, and an untrained and unprotected psyker can have anything happen to them from just being possessed by fucking demons to just straight up exploding. I'm speechless. Yeah, welcome to 40k. It'll do that. But if you get good at it, you can do all sorts of things. Like there are some people who use they use their space magic to navigate ships through space, right? Which is really fucking important. If you do not have a navigator on your ship, you're kind of fucked. Far more commonly, you've got people who use their space magic to fight said demons and everything else in the universe, because it's Warhammer 40k, there is only war and everything has to die except me. You have some people who are aligned with Chaos and the Warp and all that, who use it to summon demons. Yeah, this is a great fucking soundtrack to talk about the Warp and demons with. Hell yeah. Thank you, RNGesus. But yeah, I mean, this is reflected in the game as well. If you roll badly enough on a test, the guy that's casting the power can actually just end up sucked into the warp, or he can fucking explode and die. It is very funny. But yeah, 40k is an example of a sci-fi setting that actually has, although to be fair it's more space opera, but that's, again, we're splitting hairs. It's an example of a setting that has both sci-fi trappings and also magic in. Compare it to Star Wars. Now, we've probably all heard the line about, oh, Star Wars is a kid's film about space wizards, which upsets a lot of Star Wars fans, but I'm going to upset the Star Wars fans again in a different way, and just point out that the Force is magic. Especially with the sequel trilogy, because the Force basically just does whatever the writer needs it to do at any given time. Sort of sci-fi and fantasy is two different genres of magicism. Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. The thing is, and speaking as a sci-fi writer myself, a lot of sci-fi writers will get uppity when you say that their system has magic in. Because there's this, and certainly sci-fi fans, probably more than writers, because I think as a writer on some level you have to be aware that what you've written is a magic system. Sci-fi fans in particular will get very upset if you say that their special thing is magic. They'll go, oh, it's not magic because it actually does this, and yeah, buddy, it's magic. I'm sorry. I know this must be devastating to hear, but it is magic. It does things beyond the ken of most normal people. Usually there's a specific subgroup of people who can access those powers. You know, there's a certain overlap between traditional fantasy magic and your special powers. Like, they're magic, dude, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But the Force is just magic, okay? You have a specific group of people who can access it. They study it for ages and improve their ability with it. The higher up you go, the more impressive stuff you can do with it, which, tell me that doesn't sound like Grand Wizards. Oh, I'm a 9th level wizard, I can cast a fireball. Oh, I'm a Jedi Master, well, this Jedi Master has access to this power that only this Jedi Master can use. I'm just saying, it sounds similar. Well, when you get good enough as a Jedi, you can use this power like this. Interesting. only the most powerful Jedi have access to this, or this is more of a Sith thing, but like only the most powerful Sith have like Force lightning, right? So, point taken. I'll be honest, I think I was more or less preaching to the choir on that one, but it can be quite entertaining. Again, it's funny, right? Because it's the fans who'll get upset over it rather than the people who actually write it. I think it's because the people who write it are actually more aware. There's like, oh, well, this falls into the same kind of categories and the same kind of tropes as magic does, right? It is magic by another name. So that's something we want to think about here. So we have a vague outline, and like we don't have to do this strictly in order. This is a good guideline to follow, but like, if we get to, for example, if we get to here, and we're looking at other systems like, oh, actually, this is really cool, you know, we see something else that we like, we can always go, oh, well, we'll skip to here and put that as like something else that we can add, maybe, and then, you know, bounce around to have a look. If it turns out that our system doesn't need combat at all, or it doesn't need to cover physical and mental aptitudes, we don't have to do any of those. We can, yeah, we can do whatever we want. At the end of the day, when it comes to making a system, the only person like in control of what has to be done is you. Right, let's take a look at. Where are we? Let's go have a look at Antirium. It's fine, I'll just dog smash your name again, it's fine. So, this right here, all this is basically what I wanted to do with the system. Like, this was just a big list of things where I was like, okay, this is something that I've seen before, or something that I have encountered in another system, or something that I've been like, oh, hey, why doesn't this exist? I just kind of put it down here as, like, the ideals of this system. And there's a few things that, like, came to mind when I was doing this. It's like, well, this should be something that is, like, we want to guide new game masters. Like, if they decide to run with this system, we want to guide them to what I think being a good GM is. We also want to think about, like, the player experience and, you know, the fact there are going to be human beings sat at the table using this thing. And then just, like, there's even just, like, personal gripes, right? And something that I wanted to play around with, which I saw in another system, I was like, oh, that's cool, I want to try that as well. Albeit in a different way, is something called the Death Box. Which essentially is a consent box for, I don't want my character to die yet. And yes, that is definitely something that could be ripe for abuse. However, I also think that it's something that isn't necessarily too much of a problem with, you know, a competent GM. Like, yeah, sure. there isn't necessarily any point where any of your players' characters can die. However, if the only things you can think of for a story are, oh, well, I need to kill my players, then there's bigger problems at play than just, the death box. You can do a lot more narrative. Like, there are plenty of stories, and arguably any given story, where the main character fails, right? Like, they'll lose a fight or they'll lose something early on in the story, where if they died, just like, oh, well, that's it, we're done. Like, characters have to fail. They have to fail in some manner to be relatable. This is a big problem with... Going back to Star Wars for a second. This is a big problem with exactly Rey, right? It's that she starts off from, like, this disadvantaged background, and that's fine. But then everything just sort of seems to fall into her lap. She doesn't really have to put in a whole lot of effort to get anything. Like, she's immediately really good with a lightsaber. She's immediately really good at the Force. She pulls Force healing out of her ass in episode 9. Just out of nowhere. It sure would have been helpful if for certain protagonists of the series from episodes 1 through 3 had been able to do that. Maybe we wouldn't have had a problem with the whole Anakin's wife dying. Excuse me? Yeah, she just kind of pulls Force healing out of her fucking butt. And she heals this big, like, snake monster thing. It's very bizarre. But the point I'm trying to get to is, like, a lot of people don't like Rey. And realistically, there are 2 reasons why people don't like Rey. The first one is because she's a woman. And there are some horrible people on the internet. Which obviously isn't a valid reason, but, people suck. And then there's the second reason, which is she just isn't, like, relatable as a character. Which is something that I absolutely agree with. She is not relatable as a character. She's not particularly likable as a character. Because, again, she doesn't really have to work for anything. It all just kind of falls into her lap. And it's like, she has a little bit of a training thing on Luke's Island in episode 8. But it's not, like, really... It's not really a proper training montage. It's just kind of there to say, oh, she did some training. Well, what she really does is she slices a rock in half and almost kills some fucking penguins. Like... And I mean, who hasn't, right? But... It doesn't do anything to help because it's superficial. And because it very much comes across as... Hey... Like... Hey, we did the thing, can you stop complaining now? Like, not really? I mean, there are some people out there who like Rey, and I kind of get it. It's like, oh, she's... Some people are like, oh, she's the first, like, female Jedi main character, and I will point you to the Clone Wars and Ahsoka... The Clone Wars? Clone Wars and Ahsoka, who is a much better character just all around. I wouldn't say, like, I'm a massive Ahsoka fan, but she does what needs to be done for that role very well. Like, I understand why people would want to like Rey. The problem is, You should be asking if you like Rey as a character. Fine, fair enough. But you really should be asking for more. You should be asking for her to have some proper character development, a proper character arc. What was all that shit that was going on with her and Finn? Why was that not properly resolved? Finn just goes, "Great, I've got something to tell you, it's really important," and then he gets sucked underneath the sand, and then that plot point is never touched again. And that's a big failing for Finn's character, but it's also a failing for Rey's character, because that could have been an interesting plot point for her, and it just doesn't. You just don't get it. This is something that I see a lot in a lot of media, and I'm sure I'm going to regret saying this, a lot of what people would call woke media, right? Which is where you've got characters, you've got more female characters taking lead roles, you've got more LGBTQ+ representation, all that kind of stuff. Which is great stuff to have, right? It should definitely exist. The issue that I draw is that a lot of people kind of go, "Oh, well, it's good because it does these things," and a lot of the times it should be more nuanced than that. It should be, at least as far as I see it, it should be, I'm happy that this media exists, but I want them to do better representing these people. I am cishet, right? So this stuff isn't made for me, and I understand that. That's not what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying, oh, this stuff should be made for me or it shouldn't exist. No. This stuff should absolutely exist. I'm saying you should ask more of it. As someone who has been catered to in media for the entirety of my goddamn life, and will continue to be catered to for the entirety of my goddamn life, I'm saying that people who haven't been should be demanding more from the media that represents them. And it genuinely breaks my heart when I see people just settling for stuff that is just like crap, right? Because, oh, thank God there's finally something that represents me. It's great that you have things representing you. Please higher your standards. You deserve better, damn it. Upset Finn wasn't able to become a Jedi in the end. Yes! Finn should have been... Why wasn't he a Jedi? Messed up. Absolutely fucked up that he was not a Jedi. Oh, this is something that I want to talk about as well, and like... This has gone completely away from role-playing. Absolutely, completely gone away from role-playing, but... We're talking about story, so I guess it's close enough. Okay, so something else that I absolutely despise, right, is the Rian Johnson kind of twists. Where it's like, oh, I'm subverting the audience's expectations. That in itself is not good storytelling. So, good storytelling, right, should be fulfilling and rewarding, yada yada yada. But it should also be, like, it needs to be entertaining. But it should also have some level of integrity. And I think this is what Rian Johnson's storytelling mostly misses out on. Is that he would rather not address important questions about his plot, and he would rather effectively throw in cheap twists in an effort to surprise the audience, rather than properly set them up. Look, a good twist, right? And there's kind of a misconception about what a good twist is. A good twist will... It should be something that when you go back to read something, you go back to watch something, you can see all the little clues that, like, add up to it, and then you go, oh, holy shit, how did I not see that coming? Yeah, now I'm reading this back, this makes a whole lot of sense. What it shouldn't be is just a random fucking twist out of absolutely nowhere. Or even worse, setting up for something, and then just never following through with it. A big problem with the Star Wars sequels specifically were that they were directed by two different people. The Episode 7 and Episode 9 were directed by J.J. Abrams, and Episode 8 was directed by Rian Johnson. Both of them, as the story goes, could not stand each other, and went out of their way to change and retcon and basically just crap on each other's work from the previous movie. So you have these wild character swings, like particularly with Luke Skywalker, right? He goes from being, and I'm gonna say it just wrong. He was just wrong in Episode 8. He was this miserable, depressed old man who had just completely given up, which is not at all who Luke Skywalker should be. His whole thing was always he had hope, even in the darkest situations. Yeah, he believed that Darth fucking Vader could be brought back to the light side, and he was right. Like, But no, Rian Johnson, wanting to be Rian Johnson, decided he needed to be the most miserable, depressed man in the galaxy. Literally fucking throws his lightsaber away. I mean, yeah. Then suddenly, Episode 9, he's back to, oh, a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect, don't you think? Like, fucking... The whiplash is insane. But this is something that Rian Johnson likes to do. He likes to put in these twists that don't have any, like, real build-up. They just kind of come out of left field. I think it's somewhat similar to the Shyamalan twist, which is famous because it's from, well, I say they're famous. The director, M. Night Shyamalan, likes to put a lot of wild twists in their movies. Admittedly, I've not seen enough of his work to really know if they're just these wild twists out of nowhere, or if they're just wacky twists. And the fact that he always does them is just kind of made them into a meme, but... Anyway. So a good twist really should be something that is foreshadowed. It's like a good mystery. You should be able to figure it out based on what you, the audience, have seen. A well-written mystery will give you all the information, all the tools that you need to figure it out before the reveal. A bad mystery will have characters just randomly pulling out bullshit from their ass. Just out of nowhere. Like, a bad mystery will have characters knowing things that you could not possibly have known, and have that be a key part of figuring out the mystery. The BBC program Sherlock does this a lot. There is a lot that comes out from that. That is just a result of, oh, Sherlock knows it because he's super smart. Also, a boomerang did it. Anyway, moving on. How the fuck did we get onto this? How did we get here? What were we talking about beforehand? God. Alright, so... Anyway, so this system, I wanted to do... Oh, we were talking about space magic, and then we were talking about, like lost potential and stuff, basically. So, this system tries to do a fair few things. I wanted this to be as different from as many other systems as I could possibly make it. We started off with... Effectively, we were using Fate as a baseline. Which, Fate is kind of an interesting system. It sort of has a skill list vaguely similar to a lot of other systems. Yeah, you have like your athletics, your combat, perception, yada yada yada. But Fate uses 4d6. But it uses special d6. That basically, they're more like d3s. Where you've got a +1, a 0, and a -1. And you roll those, you add up whatever you get. And then you add on your skill rank. So, for example, you might roll 2 +1s, a 0, and a -1. So that would be a +1, and then you add on whatever your skill rank is, yada yada yada. They're called fudge dice because they're... How rude. Yeah, they're called fudge dice. They're from a system called Fudge, which is an old-ass system, but Fate uses it. The system itself, I believe, is open source, so we just kind of went ahead, borrowed that. This is the thing. You're allowed to borrow things that are open source. That is kind of the entire point of being open source. I wanted the system to be more narrative-based, so if you fail in a roll, you fail to do something, usually that will open up another path. You'll be able to do something with that. And in fact, it's actually baked into the rules where, look, if you're going to make your players roll for something, something has to happen. That's the whole point of failing forwards, is that there is always this forwards momentum. You're never in a position where... you're never in a position where you can't progress. Never complex help with player character development as well. Yes, that is very much true. That's something that some people are scared of, something that I'm scared of. Sometimes. It depends on the GM. Something that I can be scared of as a player is failing. It depends on the... It depends on the GM. But yeah. So I was looking at a system called Chronicles of Amber, which did some interesting things with magic, but it's where the idea of... Oh, I think that's what we were talking about beforehand. We were talking about space magic. Yeah, and I was meant to be talking about this. Yeah, so... Chronicles of Amber did some interesting things with magic and with actions. So, rather than... And particularly with combat. So, rather than focusing on combat in the same way as other systems do, where it's like, oh, well, each turn is the same length of time, you get one attack, you can do one other thing, and yada yada. No, we're not doing any of that. What we do instead is we go, okay, well, we're going to effectively play this out like a movie, where our focus is on specific parts, right? So, for example, you might have a sequence that takes a lot more time, like, in the world, where you've got two people fighting and it's roughly equal. No one's really... I think someone's assaulting my house with a Hoover. So I'm sorry about the background noise. Unfortunately, there's literally nothing I can do about it. That's the ambience. Yeah, the ambience of I'm in a wind tunnel. Just... It's Sunday. Why are you doing this on a Sunday? Good grief. Alright. Anyway. Right, the point I was trying to get to is, instead of focusing on combat like turn by turn, what we do is we focus on the interesting parts. So rather than being like, oh, it's your turn, what do you want to do, it's more like, okay, so this is what's happening, how do you respond? So to give it, I'll give a more specific example. So let's say you've got two people who are sword fighting. Well, rather than having them go, oh, I attack like this, and, you know, go step by step through the fight like that, what we do instead is go, okay, so this guy's coming at you, he's kind of taking something of a defensive sort of posture, what do you want to do? Oh, well, I'm going to attack into him. Okay, well, you do the rolls. And then instead of going, well, this is his next action, it would then go like, okay, so the two of you are roughly evenly matched. You can tell he's just kind of probing your defenses, and you both spar for... You both spar for like a minute or so. And you can cover all of that in a single roll. You can cover all of that in a single combat roll. Like, if one of them rolls a lot lower, let's say the guy our player is fighting rolls a lot lower, you can be like, okay, so you guys spar, and you're trading blows for a minute or so. However, you quickly get the sense that you have the upper hand, and you manage to, as you spar, you manage to back him up into a corner. But what we want to do is we want to zoom in when it matters. So let's say our player has got this NPC they're sword fighting backed up into the corner. Well, this might be the part where we want multiple combat rolls for a much smaller space of time. But let's say they try to disarm them. Well, that would probably be a combat roll. And then they succeed, they manage to disarm them, but oh no, their opponent's trying to take advantage of that situation is going for a sneaky gut punch. That might be another combat roll, or it might be a dodge roll, or it might be a notice roll. However you want to rule that. The point is, what we want to do is we want to, and something that I noticed from when I was playing role-playing games, was when we got to combat, particularly with, I was playing a lot of 4th edition D&D, which is much maligned, and it's not actually that bad. It's not great, but it's not as bad as people make it out to be. But something that I noticed playing that was that when we got to combat, I'd very much switch out of, I'm playing a role-playing game where I'm acting as a character, and I am now playing, I'm back playing a war game where I have these very specific tools to interact with and use to get a very specific outcome, right? That specific outcome being victory. And I think part of this was the fact that we had a turn order, and we had all that kind of stuff. It's that 4e experience, yeah. Technically I'm still in a 4E campaign. We don't get to play very often for reasons, but I'm still technically in it. I wouldn't reminisce over 4E. I do not hold it to the same high regard as I hold fucking 40k. No, I feel the same about 4E as I feel about every edition of D&D. That isn't 2nd edition. It's fine. It has its issues, but, you know, when you use it what it's designed for, it's fine. To be honest, a lot of the people that were shitting on 4E were going to shit on anything that wasn't exactly 3.5. And those same people are still shitting on 3.5, so... Not 3.5, 5e. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to break out of that kind of mindset. And to do that, I had to make a combat system that was very different from the combat systems that I'd made in the past. There was another system that I used to inform this as well, called Dungeon World, which I don't remember the specifics of off the top of my head. It's something else that I want to try out at some point. But yeah, to do this, the idea was that, you know, again, the broad strokes can be covered in broad strokes, so you don't need to play out 10 rounds of 2 people who are evenly matched, fighting evenly matched. You don't need to roll for every single attack, just in case it's the one that matters. You just have to figure out which one is going to be the one that matters, and then roll for that one. That probably won't sit well with a lot of the more combat-orientated people. This system isn't for them, to put it bluntly. This is not a system that was made for people who are big into combat. This is a system that was made for people who want to do the role-playing, and that's where we can loop on back to this point here. If we wanted a combat system, it would be something that's a lot more granular, something that we break things down into a lot more. It's stuff where the exact length of rounds comes in, where we need to think about grappling, strength and dexterity, how they interact with each other, the specific differences between weapons and what they're good at and bad at, what they can do and can't do, specific combat maneuvers and what kind of advantages they might give, different states of being. This is something that D&D... These are all things that D&D does, right? And this is why I maintain that D&D is more of a combat system than a narrative system, because it puts all these rules out for all these things, it puts a lot more of a focus onto all these things. Like, it might seem kind of asinine. Oh, well, of course there are rules for swords. We need to know what a sword can do. Well, you don't need to know what a sword can do in specific details unless combat is a specific part of your system. It's not a specific part of... or it's not a focus, rather, of Anthurium here. Which is why, you know... Let's just have a look through the different parts of this book. Well, if we look in combat... well, there's nothing here for what a sword does, right? There's nothing here for what any weapon does. Well, okay, maybe it's under damage? Nope. No, there's nothing for weapons under here. Well, okay. I mean, what about, there's gotta be weapons in here somewhere. Well, what about unique items or special items? Well, unique items do things. So do special items. Oh. Well, I'm not seeing any stat blocks. That's because they don't have any. Despite what this down here might say, this is just pointing out how his specific rifle is different from other rifles. It doesn't actually tell you what a rifle does. It's self-explanatory in a certain weapon specifically tied into lore. Pretty much, yeah. That's pretty much the point that I'm about to make, is that you kind of know what a gun does. You know what a sword does. Unless they do something specifically special, which, you know, would make them a special item or a unique item, and then they have their own rules. But you don't need to know that, like, outside of a combat system, you don't need to know that this weapon does more damage than this kind of weapon. It doesn't matter, right? Which is why I maintain that, you know, D&D is a combat system, because it's swords and axes and maces and bows and all that kind of stuff. They all have their own rules. Just a basic fucking sword that you pick up off the ground does 1d8 damage and can be held in one or two hands, and that means you can use a shield or not, and yada 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 yada. Does not matter in here. It doesn't have to matter, and that's the difference between a narrative system and a combat system. Usually, you will find most systems have a bit of both in. I mean, this is very much a narrative system, but it does have a whole thing on combat. Because the combat is different, but because the combat also needs to be arbitrated. There are still rules to the combat. I ran a campaign using Anthurium, and I upgraded the system as we played. I added and changed things. And it was actually very successful. In terms of the system itself, I don't think there's anything I would want to change. It could be better, sure. But in terms of actually, you know, putting something out there and saying it's completed, I'm perfectly happy with Anthurium because it does everything that I designed it to do. The other thing that I did differently was magic. So, magic is, again, it's one of those things that, like, a lot of systems do it the same fucking way. And that's usually, you have a magic stat, you have a list of spells. I didn't like that. I feel, listen, right? In a lot of depictions of magic, it is just kind of, well, there's rough guidelines, and there's sort of like, hey, here's like a baseline of what you can do at certain levels, right? Like, we would expect a wizard of this level to be able to do this. But a lot of the time, like, the best wizards in a setting or a story or whatever will be able to do things with magic, and like, they'll be able to innovate and make things up and do them off like the top of their head, which is really fucking cool. And I went, well, why can't every wizard do that? Behold, the schools of magic. basically, what I did was I went, you know what, fuck the spellbooks, fuck the list of spells, that's dumb. Look, if I was going to make a spellbook, if I was going to make a list of spells, I would have to write, like, 100 fucking spells, right? Probably more, because we've got, like, 4 different schools, yada yada yada. I'm not doing that. Trump, yes, I know. Orange Man bad. Just bear with me, okay? So, and again, I was reading through Chronicles of Amber, which is where the names of the different schools came from. Google Generate. See, no, we can't be doing that. Like, okay, so you can have Google generate a list of spells, sure. Who's going to make the rules for them? Making rules for like 90 spells, and it's not just as simple as this spell turns someone into a goat. You have to be writing out ranges, you have to be writing out effects, you have to be writing out how long they last for, what kind of things you need for them, this and that and the other. Oh my god, it's such a pain! What I'm really saying is that I didn't want to write spells. I also thought that it was restrictive to have players locked behind a list of spells for something like fucking magic, which the majority of the time is based off of what the wizard can think of, what their imagination can do, and so on and so on. Have the basis of the magic system then conform to spells generated. That's still a whole shit ton of work. I'll do it for you. Listen, fucko! You're missing the point! Okay. The point of this, right? Beyond just I didn't want to write spells. The point of this was that I don't think wizards should have to conform to a spell list. I think that's lame. I think if I'm playing a wizard, right? And when I say wizard, I mean mage. And when I say mage, I mean anyone who can use magic. And when I say magic, I mean supernatural abilities that aren't superpowers. So when I'm playing fucking Space Wizard 9000, right? When I'm playing Zoltan the Based, I don't think that he should be stuck looking in his spellbook. I think he should be able to go, I have control over the arcane energies of the fucking rift, right? I'm just gonna blast them with magic, or I'm gonna use that to try and do this and that and the other. So that's where this came from. And basically, the whole premise with this is that you pick a school. This is how you cast your magic. Jim will have to balance that and pick those and think up spells. It's not about spells. It's not about spells. It's about using magic in a certain way, right? But you do it on the fly. Like, you're not casting a spell called Fireball. What you're doing is you're using your fire magic to make a ball of fire. Right? And on the surface it sounds the same. But the difference is, with the former one, you have to have the fireball spell, right? With the latter, just being a fire-based mage is enough to be able to make a ball of fire and throw it. But similarly, if you are a fire-based mage and you're like, okay, I want to make a wall of flame, well, in other systems you'd have to have a spell that's called Wall of Flame or something. And I think that's lame. I think if you're a fire mage, you should be able to make a fucking wall of fire. there are checks and balances. It mostly comes down to the DM being like, no, you're not powerful enough to do this shit. But yeah. So you've got 4 different types of magic, and realistically, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Like, do you think that depends on the way the spell's being cast, like dimensional? Well, yeah. But again, this is like... Again, you're a mage. If you're... Yeah, unless you're like a very novice mage... Like, you should have control over that shit. You should be able to dictate how you're doing things. Oh, oh, like, you're saying, like, oh, but I should be able to cast Fireball and, like, make it into a wall of fire, right? As, like, 2 separate spells? I mean, in a system like D&D, yes, they would have to be different spells, because in most systems like to take their spells and go, oh, okay, it works in this exact way, and it hits these exact kind of spaces, and it does exactly this kind of thing. You might have a GM who's like, oh, no, if you want to cast it like this, that's fine. But that comes down to the GM. Now, fire conjured. Now, I might need more clarification on that one. But no, like, the bottom line is that most, most magic systems that use a spell list, I tend to find are too restrictive. And that just doesn't... It just felt lame, right? It just doesn't sit right with me as a DM. I think it's more of a holdover from earlier editions of games, and it doesn't necessarily need to exist anymore. So, with this one specifically, I went with the idea that mages can pick... Essentially, they can pick a kind of spell that they are good at, right? Or like a thing that their spellcasting draws from. So the example we've been talking about is fire, right? But got a whole bunch of different domains here. These are just like example domains. We had like stuff like air and like stuff like elements, like air, fire. We've got liquid here, which is rather than water, it's like the control over different fluids. Which, if you can't do creative stuff with that, then I don't know. I know that might be a you problem, Chief. Just think about all the things in the world that are liquid. Now, again, the GM would have some level of control, i.e., you can't just be like, I'm now going to exsanguinate this man because I have control over liquids and he is fundamentally made of blood. A good GM would be like, yeah, you're good, but you're not that good. I had a player who, one of their domains was Shadow. And they used that to pretty good effect. They were kind of a problem. Again, this would not be for everyone. But, you know, in terms of a story-based game, this worked very well. for what we wanted to do. So effectively what you'd be doing is... unfortunately these didn't end up as hammered out as I wanted them to be, Pattern and Logris. The idea with Logris was that it was more of a risk-reward system. Whereas Pattern was meant to reward you for essentially casting spells back to back. This was something that I didn't actually fully... We did run with some rules for these, but I didn't get them fully ironed out before we finished play, sadly. Sorcery is just your basic spellcasting. And then we have trump cards. So, trump cards were something that I was interested in making. Unfortunately, we didn't really get around to making it happen. Because there was a lot of stuff with Trump specifically that it was just a real headache to make work. It was the only domain that had a spell list. And the idea was that you would have, as a Trump user, you would have a deck of cards, right? And to cast a spell, you'd have to draw a card. But then that was too random, the spells were too wide in what they would do. There were questions about what would happen if you drew a spell and you couldn't cast it. Because another idea was that you couldn't recast a spell until you'd drawn through your entire deck. So yeah, it also just kind of didn't fit in with the idea of the rest of the rest of the spell schools, where the other three would let you just kind of do things on the fly and get really creative with how you're using your domains. If you were using Trump, it was then this very chaotic, but also very strict sort of idea of how you were casting spells. Like, you could only cast specific spells, which would have to be cast in specific ways. And then it was entirely random which spells you drew as well. Unsurprisingly, it never got implemented, and we never actually added it into the game proper. Not to mention, it kind of has a problematic name. Which is a shame, because, like, I like the idea and kind of the theme of... It's the idea of drawing the trump card from your deck, like, the best card you could possibly draw. And, yeah, I did mess around with some Hearts of the Cards mechanics, and they just didn't pan out. Trump, yeah. So yeah, it just didn't pan out, so we didn't implement it. Probably for the best. But yeah, in essence, a lot of what this system was trying to do was effectively streamline and simplify a lot of stuff that you see in other systems, particularly in D&D. You know, we've got a much more straightforward combat system where you don't have to worry about initiative. It's generally a lot faster as well. Instead of combat being like an hour for an encounter, you could blow through a long encounter in like 20 minutes. You know, you could have a short encounter done in as little as 5, maybe even 1 minute if someone's really on their fucking game. That's pretty good. That is phenomenally fast. Part of the reason for it is because it treats... the system treats combat the same as it treats, well, almost the same, as it will treat any other event in the game. Like, there has to be some difference. Just purely because, you know, damage is involved, right? And people getting hurt, and you need to arbitrate that somehow. My phone is going berserk behind me, and I'm just not paying any attention to it. But yeah, the idea was to make it faster, and it was to keep people invested in the story, while at the same time having these fights happen. And it did it. It did it quite well, to be honest. We don't need to talk about the magic matrix. We can talk about meta magics. They were just kind of a fun little thing that I put into magic as well, was like the idea that you could make the magic more personal to you by having a quirk that would come along with your spells, right? So like these were like secondary rider effects that you would have on your spellcasting. Like, you might be able to cast your spells faster, but they wouldn't hit as hard. You might be able to make spells that don't usually have, like, a physical form. So, like, any sort of energy or sound-based magic, right? You might be able to give that, like, a physical form. Or the player that I had that was using Shadow was able to make, like, physical weapons out of Shadow because they had the manifestation thing here. But yeah, there was and the whole thing with the system came about because I was looking at other games I was playing, and you know, I was trying to find... I wasn't perfectly satisfied with the games that I was playing, so I was trying to find something that would fit into what I wanted to do. Which is how this came about. I just sat down and went, well, I'm going to make this, then. And yeah, like, I play tested it, and I found it was, you know, it's all good. It does what I want it to do. It's not perfect, but
Raise your horns into the air. There is plenty air to share. All are welcome. Take a chair and sing a song loud and strong. Men of war and men of care. Maidens.
all right. So, what are we doing with this all? Okay, so something that I've wanted to do for a while, something that I've been messing with, but I've not really gone particularly far with it, is, and it's something that I've seen other people try to do as well, and I don't think anybody's got it quite right, is a role-playing system for Yu-Gi-Oh! or to put it in a less I'm going to get fined out of a canon by Konami kind of thing. A card game based RPG. I've seen plenty of RPGs that are like, oh, this is inspired by this game, and it's basically just like a spin-off of D&D, but you can summon monsters. And it's like, that's fine. If that's your bag, that's fair enough. I know there are Pokemon RPGs that do that. Not what I'm aiming for. Ultimately, what I want to be able to do is pull out my physical fucking deck of Yu-Gi-Oh cards and be like, yes, I can play the RPG using these. That's what I want to do. So, what it do? Let's see more card games inspired by Yu-Gi-Oh, like D&D inspired by Hunger Games. Yeah. Well, no, I know that we've got a bunch coming out. I say there's a bunch coming out. I know we have a few. Similar to Inscription. Yeah, like, God, Inscription was so fucking cool, man. I say that like it's not still around. Like I couldn't just boot it up and play it right now. But yeah, yeah, people have made actual like physical cards of Inscription, right? Like people have made physical copies of some of the cards in Inscription, which is very cool. Like I don't think it actually exists as a physical card. I'll have a look now. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, someone's actually just made it. I'd buy it. I'd play it. Oh, he's pretty fucking sick. But yeah, no, okay, so enough about Inscription. It's a very good game. I will play it on stream at some point. But so what I want to do is I want a role-playing game where essentially the idea that I'm running with, right, is like every protagonist or like every important character in, and I'm going to be talking about it through the lens of Yu-Gi-Oh, right, because I think it's the only card game I'm aware of that has an actual like successful anime. Don't at me about Duel Masters. I know it exists. I watched it as a kid. I also played Duel Masters as a kid. Unfortunately, that shit died harder than the Queen, so... yeah, kind of off the table for this discussion. It's still going strong in Japan, I believe. I think they still have new Duel Masters releases. It just flopped in the West. Which is wild, because it was, when I was a kid in primary school, the three card games that everybody had cards of. Well, actually, the 4 card games that everybody had cards of, but we only actually played with 3 of them in this order. Yu-Gi-Oh was the most popular, then Duel Masters, then Magic the Gathering, and then Pokemon. Which is crazy because I think globally, I think Pokemon's the biggest, then Magic, then Yu-Gi-Oh! And Duel Masters just doesn't fucking exist. Right? Like, it barely exists. And then... I'm not sure if the Pokemon TCG is bigger than Magic. I'm not sure which of those is the biggest. But those are the two big ones, right? And Yu-Gi-Oh! Is also part of the... Yu-Gi-Oh! Is also part of the big three. It's not really fair to leave Yu-Gi-Oh! Out of that discussion. Pokemon was huge in your school, sadly. Yu-Gi-Oh! Was not as popular. Yeah, I think Pokemon for me was really big in exactly like the year 2000, right? And then Yu-Gi-Oh! Came out the first... in the West, the first, like... Dex and Thimpacks came out in, like, 2002. And where I was... Yu-Gi-Oh! Absolutely fucking exploded. Like, it was the big thing. And, like, a couple of us had older brothers that played, like, Magic and stuff. So, that was a thing. And then Duel Masters came out a couple of years later, and it looked... It was like, in the same vein as Yu-Gi-Oh! And it had a TV show, so we got into that. Anyway, so, talking about this game through the lens of Yu-Gi-Oh! Every, like, major character in Yu-Gi-Oh! Has, like, a signature monster, right? Or a few cards that they are well known for having or interacting with, like... Yugi obviously has, like, the Dark Magician, but he's also got stuff like Kuribo and... fucking, I don't know... Guy of the Fierce Knight? Catapult Turtle? But no, you've got Joey with the red eyes, and then he's got, like... the fucking pile of cards that he got from minor characters like fucking Jinzo and Fortress Whale and shit. God, I hate Joey's deck so much. Okay, I need to talk about this for a second. So, Joey's... Okay, so all of the decks in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series Duel Monsters, all of them suck, right? By modern standards, all of them are garbage, because not a single one of them has a coordinated... Not a single one of them has a coordinated strategy, right? Yugi just always pulls whatever card he needs. Kaiba vaguely has a strategy, but most of his cards read, this is just a better card than whatever your opponents can possibly have. Yeah, you don't start seeing decks with actual strategies until GX, arguably. It might even be as late as 5Ds. But most of the decks in Duel Monsters are just piles of garbage. Especially Joey's deck. Because it's just made up of the best monsters that he won from other people that have no synergy with each other. And just... He almost loses to... I think it's Odeon. When he's dueling him on the fucking blimp. He always loses to him because he draws fucking Fortress Whale. He draws a prick and he's just like, damn, I can't use this with anything that's in my hand. Oh man, I'm gonna have to play a face down and hope for the best. It's like, yeah, Joey, I wonder why your deck's failing. Is it because it's made up of a bunch of garbage that has no synergy? Like, no cap, I would wipe the floor with Joey. I'd fucking blast his ass into the past so goddamn hard. And I'm not saying this as like, you know, as if the Kallen law means I'm a good duelist or anything. I'm talking about me! The guy behind the screen! No cap, I would beat Joey's ass so hard. Clear strats in 5Ds, I'd say it started in GX. Yeah, I think it started with GX. like, you started getting archetypes at that point. So you had cards that actually supported each other and did things like that. Like, you had What's-His-Face Zane with, like, the Cyber Dragon deck. You had, Jaden's Elemental Heroes. Had a Jesse, help me. Ow. Yeah, you had, the Crystal Beasts and stuff. But yeah, so my thoughts are, well, rather than like having players make a deck of 40 cards or whatever, the idea would be that like each player would have like a number of signature cards, right? Which they could always have access to, but they'd have like specific requirements to bring them out, so you can't just like turn one and be like, oh, here's my best monster, get fucked, right? But then around that you'd have like a number of other cards, something like, yeah, like 5 to 10 other cards that you could use to support them. And this would be like monsters you can use to summon your best monsters, or, you know, spells and traps and stuff. Yada yada yada. You know how Yu-Gi-Oh works. The idea would be that you could do this with most card games. Like, I'd want you to be able to use like magic cards and stuff. Fucking Duel Masters cards. Like, no, that's pretty much the whole thing, right? I don't even know what like the greater system would look like. Like, would you be able to play without a deck? And we'd essentially be doing like the whole summon a monster, do your thing with it kind of thing. Like I was talking about earlier, like the fucking Pokemon RP, which is also something I want to play. I'm just so fucking fascinated. I don't think I still have the files for it, actually. No, I definitely don't have the files for it. Or do I? No, I do not. It's such a wild system. Yeah, so there's, I think there's a couple, but the one I'm thinking of... Oh, well, thank you. That's yeah, these are definitely what we're looking for. Sorry, you have to watch me typing like a boomer. Was it this one? Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's this one. Oh, this is actually a sequel to the one I was thinking of. Okay. Shut up. Jason MD, what is this? Yeah, like... this isn't the page I was looking for. Is it might be on this. Who dares? Oh, hey Dragon. Thanks for joining us. Welcome in. We're looking at the Pokemon, We're looking at the Pokemon RP right now. I'm trying to find the actual book, like, this shouldn't be so difficult. Are they actually charging for it? That's gonna get them in trouble. Yeah, so that's really not a good idea. So, I'm going to take a hot second to just talk about fan content for a second, right? So, and bear in mind, copyright law and all that kind of stuff is really fuzzy. So this shit can be really hard to, like, nail down. But, in essence, there's sort of an unwritten rule where a lot of companies won't really give a shit if you make something using their content. Like, some of them do. Some of them absolutely do. And legally speaking, they are well within rights to tell you, hey, that's our property, stop that. Even if you're not making money off it, they can just step in and be like, yeah, this is our property, you don't have any right to use it, cut that out. This is something that Games Workshop has done a few times with Warhammer 40k. And every time they do it, the community gets really pissed at them. Because it's just so unnecessary. Right? It's just so... What you're essentially doing is going, oh, you're making a thing that other people like using our thing? How fucking dare you? No one can have this thing now. Which then people aren't getting a thing that they like, so like, oh, well, that sucks. They didn't have to do that, these guys weren't hurting anybody, they weren't making any money off it. You, why you like this? Which, yeah, I get. I also agree. However, when money gets involved, yeah, no, most companies at that point will go, oh, you're now making money off of our property. Yeah, that's not on. You can cut it out or we're taking you to court. And to that, I say that actually the companies have a pretty good point. Yeah, even if the system itself is something that you've made from the ground up, if you're using someone else's property, someone else's creation to make money off of it, i.e., you're selling a Pokemon trade role-playing game? Yeah, they kind of have every right to come after you and make you stop. That's kind of a different story. If it's, like I say, if it's a fan project and, like, specifically they're not monetizing it, nah, leave them alone. Like, they're not hurting anybody. It's when they start, like, actually monetizing it that's like, oh, yeah, no, they kind of have a point. I know some people would be like, oh, but they're just like small-time developers, or they're just like one or two people. As that's not the point, right? And like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of big businesses, right? I think they take the piss all the time, and it's, it kind of kills me inside to say that I agree with them on any level. However, as someone who also creates things, I have to, consider, well, what if someone took something that I made and started, selling something that was based on that and started making money off of that? It's like, well, at the very least, I'd want my fair cut. I don't think it's particularly fair that someone else can make money based off of something that I've made. This is very different to another argument that some companies would make, which is like, oh well, if you've made this, you're preventing us from making. You're effectively preventing us from making money based off of it. I think that's a bullshit argument. The only people preventing you from making money off of it are yourselves. If you want to make money off of a project like that, either hire the people who are making it, or make one yourself. God, this... I know there used to be a free version of this around. Yeah, I'm sorry everyone, we're going into Reddit. Pokemon Tabletop Adventures is the first to go big, originally has strong elements of third ed. Tends to take out the most Pokemon adventure manga. Spectrum is sometimes fight alongside it. Yeah, so this was something that it did, Can we get this bigger? Yeah, this was something that when I saw it in the book, I fucking died laughing. So you can have different classes of trainers, right? Some of them will literally just be like, yeah, I'll go toe-to-toe with my Pokemon, I'll fucking fight. I'll throw hands. Stream's gone down a rabbit hole. Yeah, we've been down a few rabbit holes today. Yeah, like, so you know in, like, the Pokemon games, like, you'll have, like, you have stuff like Ace Trainers and, like, Pokemon Rangers, you'll have, like, Bug Catchers and all that kind of stuff. You can have different classes of trainers in this, but some of them are, like, the fucking fighting guys, and they'll just be like, yeah, I'll square up alongside my Pokemon, I'll throw hands. But, like, you can have psychics as well and stuff. This was one of those fan projects where, like, I was talking about it earlier, and it's like, this was one of those projects that actually got to, like, 200 pages. Like, it was extremely thick. And a lot of that was crunch. Which, is to say a lot of that's rules. Oh, shit. Should be manageable. Pokemon Fight MV exists because of course it does. Yeah, that scans. Yeah, so a lot of these are just effectively mods for games that already exist, right? So this was pretty much, well, this was very similar to D&D 3rd Ed. I had more stuff on it, so it's not really fair to say it's just a mod. But yeah. There's one that's just a hack Fate Accelerated, there's one that's a mod for 5e. Yeah, no, yada yada yada. What? I'm sorry, hold on. What? I've never heard of this, I need to read this. Also Pokeroll, which is more focused on modelling the anime. It's fundamentally simpler than TTRPG, though it's still fairly crunchy. My actual biggest issue with it is how, for some reason, despite being an anime game, they base every move exactly off its in-game effects and stats very Pokemon off their in-game equivalents. I don't like that. Again, I think this falls into the same category that I was talking about with Magic. Where it's like, you don't need to, like, restrict it that much. It doesn't have to be that specific. First edition especially had an issue with this, where Mon's HP was based on its height in the Pokedex, so you had stupid shit like Dragonair being tankier than Dragonite. Okay. Pokemon's rules like general rules are decent. I think one thing it does that I wish every Pokemon Hack did was make spectating battles actually fun. Times when I actively agreed not to fight a gym battle because I was sufficiently excited to just comment on the sidelines. That's the weaknesses. I think you just use time to post education for Pokemon. So right now I think it's too caught up in the execution shouldn't be any less than fully evolved mons, as that would go against the anime to the point where your Pokemon don't even really matter. See, I feel like that's the best way to run it, right? Like, if you're going to make a Pokemon role-playing game, what you're going to find is, like, if I asked everybody who watches this to give me a list of, like, their 3 favourite Pokemon, I guarantee you we would see 6 different Pokemon. Like, people like weird Pokemon for weird reasons. Like, not everybody likes the best Pokemon. So surely a system where it doesn't really matter too much what Pokemon you pick, so much as you have, you know, a cohesive team, and, you know what you're doing, and so much as you need to know what you're doing. Surely that's more important than being like, actually, if you want a water type, you need to take, I don't know, fucking... I can't think of any fucking water types. You need to have Golduck because it's got the best special attack for a water type. Oh, you shouldn't be using Wooper. I'll take my Wooper until the end of the earth. Alright, let's get out of here. We're stuck in the rabbit hole. Let's free ourselves. Alright, so... what to do? What do we want our system to do? And it... So we want to be doing something with trading cards. 1 to 3 key cards, character, I don't know, 5 to 15 supporting cards. I feel like 15 is probably too big a number, but I'm also thinking about some, like, archetypes and, ooh, yikes. Yeah, some archetypes need that space, Jesus. Although, what we're not doing is we're not just, like, recreating a, card game. Cards serve as props to support the RPG. So does not use the card stats as anything more than a... Whoops. I can't spell. Deadline to aid in storytelling. Focus on combat in the rules. Okay, so what this basically says, right? What this basically says is that it's technically a combat system because we have to spend a significant amount of time explaining how the combat works. Because it's going to end up being significantly different from other games, right? Like, we've got this thing where the stuff that you need to... Like, the stuff that you're going to be relying on to win an encounter is predicated by these other supporting cards. And that's fairly different from anything that I've played, at least. Ah, minor spelling mistake. Who does it already? Are there any questions? Good work. Alright, how the fuck are we doing this? Be good. So... we're kind of breaking ground here. Look at TCGs. Games progress. Alright, so we're going to want to, because this is a role-playing game that is based on trading card games, we're going to want to look at trading card games, just so we understand how they're, like, how they tend to go, how they tend to work and develop, at least on a match-by-match basis, right? We also want to look at TCG based shows and how their games progress. So ultimately, what we're aiming to do is actually less emulate a trading card game in a role-playing game. And what we're really aiming to do is actually just emulate the TV shows of those games in a role-playing game. So what this ultimately comes down to is looking at what makes, like, the different matches in those shows work, and then trying to figure out how we can emulate that in real life. Not in real life, in the game. Oh, God. I've been talking too long, my brain has turned into spaghetti. Okay, in terms of foundations... In terms of foundations, we're probably looking at something similar to... Actually, now that I think about it, the foundation is probably going to be entirely removed from the card system, right? Did I get my pills? I don't have pills, what do you mean? So we won't worry about magic, we don't need to worry about combat. I think, realistically then, I'm not even sure about, like, mental ability. I think maybe physical? I mean, you can do all of this through roleplay, right? So we need to think about what dice we're going to use, and we need to think about stats. I think this is probably going to be relatively straightforward. I don't want to just lean into like D20 shit, but that's probably the easiest option. It's probably the most accessible. Oh, that said, we could use percentile actually. Yeah, I've not gotten to use percentile in a hot fucking minute. Let's do this now. What? What does this mean? Alright, so let's just add in a table. So if we go with like the usual 6. Where am I? Is that right? Yeah. Alright, so we can go strength. Levels. Let's put speed. Intelligence. Okay, 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, 52. That's probably too high, actually. 6. Okay, so what we've done here is we've just made a very simple foundation. This is just a basic stat block, right? And you should recognize this if you play Dungeons and Dragons because it is pretty much the same. There's a lot of D20 systems that use... Look, I'll just be straight with you. There's a bunch of D20 systems, right, that use exactly this stat block. They will slightly rename a couple of these, but for all intents and purposes, it is just the core 6 from Dungeons and Dragons. Actually, what we'll do... Don't know if this will do what I wanted to do. Oh, whoops. Oh, it's fine. Why is that one grey? I mean, they're all grey, but why is it... Okay, well... Fuck it. We just have an extra large charisma box for now, it's fine. So... Yeah, we've got 5 basic kind of things. Yeah, enjoy the free advertising, Travago, you're welcome. Not sponsored. And then we've got enough points for 60 in each of these, so that's a little over average, so that's fine. All this needs to do is exist. Right, we can build on this later on, but we don't actually have to do anything with it. It's enough that it's here. And then at character creation, you give them 300 points, you go, okay, spend them however they want. So they're like, oh, well, I want a fucking, I don't know, 51 in strength, 79 in toughness, fucking 10 in speed, 50 in intelligence, and how much is left in charisma. Because I'm a smart boy. God damn it. Sure. 110 in charisma. I mean, obviously not, but like... And in case anyone's not familiar with how percentile works, you roll 100-sided dice and you try and get below whatever score you have in here. Imagine dumping all your skills in charisma. Hey, it works for Arfield. But yeah, okay, so that's fine. So the deck. Okay, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here already. So combat. Why are you crying? What do you mean? What do you mean? Should I be crying? Should I be crying? Should I be concerned? You guys say mean things about me? You guys wouldn't say mean things about me, right? Guys? Anyway. No, it's to lift up the veil. To lift up the veil for just a second. So the different states of my for my me here, right? Like this and this. They're all mapped to the number pad on my keyboard. So when I was using the calculator earlier, I accidentally switched which face I was using. I kind of forgot about it in the moment. Okay, hey, listen. You keep talking like that, I'm gonna cry. You don't want me to cry, do you? You wouldn't do that to me. Alright. So now we kind of have to try and figure out, like, how combat works. Which... I guess we can have two kinds of combat. We can have, physical combat, which is... Combat. I fucking hate you. Combat, thank you. Alright, which is literally just strength versus toughness. Beats T. Target is KO'd. And obviously these aren't having to mess with the keyboard. I am, it's true. We're having a fucking Barney over here. Yeah, obviously these aren't like the fully hammered out rules. Right? There's no fucking system in the universe where it's just like, oh yeah, that's fine. But like, this also, like, this is as in-depth as it needs to be. Right, it's just, you compare how hard you hit to how well they can take a hit. Like, it'd probably change if there were, like, firearms and stuff, but we're probably aiming to not deal with exactly that right now. And then we've got card combat. Why does it keep wanting to type combatants? Have I written combatants anywhere else in here? I don't think I have. That's why it's throwing me off so badly. I literally haven't written it anywhere else. It just really wants to talk about combatants. So let's see. It's a duel and it should be the focus of the system, but not necessarily the game. That the GM, the game master, runs. Okay, so that should have... What do we commonly have in card games? We commonly have life totals / life points, decks, hands, back row / resources, extra deck. Who dares? Master Liar, thank you for the follow. Special cards? Yeah. Yeah, that probably goes in here, right? Or do you mean like special cards like the God cards from Yu-Gi-Oh? It's like super powerful cards kind of thing. Oh no, like synchros and stuff. Yeah. You've got graveyards and destroyed zones. Banished, exiled, / out of game. Actually out of the game. Call them FE cards. Okay, I think we may have been slightly lost in translation here. You know, we're not making a TCG. We're making a role-playing game. I will end you. Oh, come back. Get out of here! Get out of here with that! Oh, now you don't want to do it, huh? Are you happy? Are you happy now? Fuck off. I am a card combatant. Oh, we can make card combatant. We can have a racing spin-off. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh did it. I'm not even joking, Yu-Gi-Oh had a kart racer. Card games on motorcycles. Yes, it was card games on motorcycles, but no, there was genuinely, I'm not making this up, there's genuinely a kart racing game for Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds on the Wii. Yu-Gi-Oh's 5D's Weenie Breakers. Cursed? Oh god, I remember this. Amazing chat room. It's amazing because I did not encounter this game in the wild. I was only made aware of it, like, maybe a couple of months ago? Oh dear. Anyway. Okay, I think that covers pretty much everything.
It's been a long year.
Did the rounds back in the day. Yeah, I mean, as far as I understand, it's very much shovelware. But yeah, I just never encountered it myself. Alright, so that's probably all stuff we'd have to... Well, this is all stuff we can think about, but I think the only stuff that's actually going to be, like, key to the game, and, like, I mean, like, the very Because we want to strip this down as much as possible. We want this to be as simple to understand, at least off the bat. It's got to be as easy to get off the starting block as possible, right? So when I'm thinking about making a system, right? 2 things I want to think about. 1, what's it going to be like to run it? 2, what's it going to be like to play it? And I want to assume that whoever's playing it has never played a game before in their entire life. I think if I do that, then it means I'm going to come in at it from... Like, I'm not making assumptions about what people know. Which means I have to explain things properly. It means I have to explain things in a robust manner. So, yeah, I'm not going to miss anything. But that also means I'm not going to be putting in things that don't have to be in there, just for the sake of, you know, oh, because I can. I think that's something that kills a lot of systems, or, like, this is stuff that tends to get left out, right? Like, if we circle back to talking about D&D for a second, I think most of the people that play D&D do not know the combat rules fully. I think they know... And, like, even the people who are good at, like, the combat side of it, I think people will know how to move. I think they'll know about AC. They'll probably know, to some degree, about spellcasting, if they've played a spellcaster. But I think a lot of, like, the specific maneuvers and stuff, I think that all gets left by the wayside a lot of the time, because people just... You just don't need them. Oh, sure, they're nice to have. It's nice that they're there. But they don't need to be there. But then, if you throw a new player at D&D and be like, oh, read the combat rules, well, they're going to come across these maneuvers and be like, oh my god, there's so much here. I think this is why a lot of people are like, oh, well, if you're new to D&D, you should, the best way to learn is by playing. Because, yeah, trying to read the books like that is kind of insane. I don't know, it's not how I'd recommend getting into it. And that's kind of the approach that I take when I'm making a system. It's like, well, you know, I don't want to put in too much stuff that's going to throw people off. There's already a lot to go through just by virtue of it being a book. I don't want to waste people's time with extraneous stuff, especially if it's stuff that I can just add in later on. So, out of this lot, that's important because that's stuff that you can actively play. I don't think we need to worry about... We definitely don't need to worry about, like... As, like, a starting thing... So, something that kind of happened with Yu-Gi-Oh! And I think Magic as well, is that early on in the design phase, you have stuff like the graveyard, right? Where when a card's destroyed or used, it goes to the graveyard. And then you have cards that can bring things back from the graveyard. So then you kind of needed Graveyard 2.0, which is, well, when stuff is destroyed and sent here, you can't get it back. And for a while, that's how things were, and everything was peaceful and beautiful in the world. And then some sick bastard made cards that could bring cards back from being removed from play. So we end up with Banished and Exiled, which is effectively Graveyard 2.0. It's kind of harder to get things out of there, but not always. I know that in Yu-Gi-Oh! Specifically, there's a few archetypes that are quite happy to have their cards banished, and are quite capable of getting them back. Thunder Dragon, off the top of my head, is very good at just going, oh, our stuff's banished? That's cute. Anyway, his Thunder Dragon fusion, I'm going to just get those back and make a fusion monster out of it. It's great. Yeah, Twilight Swan likes banishing their own monsters as well. Shiranui loves banishing their own monsters and then getting them back for synchro plays. Yeah. So, theoretically, in these games, there's not really any way of permanently removing cards. At this point in Yu-Gi-Oh!, some of the best removal just spins stuff back to the hand or the deck. Nightmare Unicorn is a very powerful extra deck monster because you can bring that out and then put a card from the field back into the deck. It's a really powerful form of removal because it doesn't destroy, it doesn't banish, which means if your opponent is running anything that can bring things back from the graveyard, well, it doesn't matter, you just put that card back in the deck, which often means they have to draw it again. Which in some cases is a lot better. If that card has what's called a floating effect, so if it does something when it's destroyed or sent to the graveyard or banished, that won't trigger because it's gone to the deck. It's not, gone to the graveyard or been banished. And this is kind of a problem that we could run into if we're not careful with just how much of this we mess with. So I think what we will do is... I don't actually want to delete anything. So what we want to do is I'm going to call starting block life/wincon deck the hand special cards, which is going to be either the extra deck or heart of the cards. Let's not call it that. Fate of the cards, there we go. Now we can do better. Cards of Fate. Cards of Fate. And then... Oops. Oh, let's talk about the field as well. Alright, so... we don't have the time in this stream to go into any of these in great detail. Essentially, what I'm thinking, right? What I'm thinking is... let's just save this. Thank you, that's very helpful. Right. Card game. On tabletops. There we go. What were we calling this again, chat? Forgotten the stupid card combatants, right? Let me just open paint. Should use a brush. Alright, so what I'm thinking... oh, the caps. Hey, I remembered. Right, so what I'm thinking is we've got the deck here, right? I'm just using this as like a visual thing. It's not how I'm actually gonna like. You don't have to lay out the game like this. So you've got the deck. You've got the hand of cards. Got like the special cards here, and then we got like the field and stuff, which is just covered in ketchup. Wow. There we go, wonderful. So what I'm thinking is we've got our deck of cards here, we've got a starting hand or whatever. And the idea is that you have a number of cards that you just have anyway, right? And this is stuff that you're using to bring out the guys from here. And these are like the signature cards. See? These are the signature. These are the guys that you use to win, like 90% of the time. These are like Yugi's Dark Magician. These are Kaiba's Blue Eyes. Yusei's Stardust Dragon. Jack's fucking Red Dragon Archfiend. I'm trying to think of like literally anyone else. I don't know, fucking Orbital's Googly Eyes Drum Dragon. Which is a real card, by the way. But look, these are the important cards. These are the cards that you use to support them. Whether that's stuff that you use to bring them out, or if it's, or if it's like, just other cards that kind of support what you're doing, you know, like, stuff like trap cards, like Mirror Force and stuff, you know the ones. If I was good at this, I'd be able to do a thing as well for, like, resources. So stuff like the lands and magic, but that might be getting too thick into things. So let's just do some opening thoughts. The life should probably start low. Juice should be quick. The deck, small. The deck should be randomized. So, here's the thing. We want to keep a level of randomness, right? I think part of the appeal of these games is having, like, an idea of luck. However, what we don't want to do is have luck randomly gating people off from the things that they need. So what we don't want to do is have, like, these key cards that you're going to use to win just, like, kind of stuck in the deck somewhere. The worst thing imaginable for this system would be to have people sat with, like, a full grip of cards and just being like, well, I've not drawn the one copy of the big monster I need, so gonna have to pass. That would be lame. However, if we've got a deck of, like, 10 or so cards that are see, the thing is, we want our players to be relying on like 1 or 2 cards as like signature monsters, because that's just like, that's the thing, right? That's like the trope. But the caveat to that is that they have to be able to access it. So I think the idea in my head right now is like, you've got the deck of, I don't know, like 10 cards. Anyway, when it's like 10 cards into a hand of like 4 or 5 or 3, you know, as long as you've got a good balance, you shouldn't be bricking most of the time. You should be fine. Just as long as you're playing enough starters and stuff, you know. But that's just deck building. We can get into that later on. What I'm thinking is that you've got these cards that you can use to set up for your big monster, and then when you need your big monster, you can just pick it out of this side deck. But you get that instead of your normal draw. I think that's probably fine. The hand scale with deck size. The field as above. It is what it is. Special cards can be chosen instead of a normal draw. Sick. Maybe they can't attack on the turn that they're summoned or something, but that would be a balance issue for way later on. Something else worth bearing in mind as well, like, I think a lot of people, when they do start making rules for things, they kind of assume, oh, it's got to be balanced off the bat, and like, any conceivable way that this could be broken has to be addressed immediately. And that's just not, like, feasible, right? You will not be able to account for everything when you first make a rule, and a lot of the time, like, you might even see problems with rules going forwards, but it's a problem that's like, there's no rush to address it. It's more important to have the baseline foundations laid down, and be like, yeah, the rules aren't perfectly balanced, but at least they're all there and the machine is working, than it is to, like, pick each individual part and try and polish it and get it absolutely perfect before putting it in. Like, if you do that, you'll never get out of the design phase. So, yeah, I mean, like, obviously you want to keep these things in mind and be like, oh, that's a potential problem that could crop up later. And, like, yeah, you want to address that, sure, but you can wait on it. You don't have to do it immediately. Like, address the problem when it's actually a problem. You don't want to try shooting these things before they're actually, because it might not even be an issue, right? And then if you put all this time and all these resources into it, you just kind of wasted a whole bunch of time on something that doesn't matter. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Exactly. Alright, so... So I think this makes sense. That's fine. for where we are. So the next stages would be actually properly like stating this out. Be stating it out and then probably fucking around with some physical product. But we're not going to do that right now. That is a job for another stream. So I'll save this. I think this is where I'm gonna lead off, actually. Card Combatants, we'll see another day. Yeah, this is probably what we'll pick up again next Sunday. Let me put myself on here. Alrighty, let's... Alright, let's pause music. I am going to try and find somewhere that I can send you all. I don't know if anybody knows anybody that's streaming. I'd imagine not. I'd imagine most of my chat don't watch stream on Sunday. I mean, yeah, I know. Alright, tell you what, we'll try and raid this person. Where is my raid button? There is my raid button. We're going to raid Raxby. They have absolutely nothing to do with our channel, but they are currently streaming. They are streaming Pokemon. Oh, so I want to do a raid because it's just a nice thing to do. It grows the community and stuff. So it's a way to support other streamers. Unless you're applying to Dragon, in which case, yeah, you do you. Good luck, have fun. This dude with a wing thing. Alright, so I'll sort out the raid in the end screen. But in any case, we're done for today. Thank you all for turning up. Thanks for listening to me ramble. Thanks for talking and being an active chat. You know, I love to see it. I will be back tomorrow at 5. I'll be playing more Star Rail. And hopefully you all can join me then. If not, take care until next time. I'll leave you all with Raxby. We'll press the read button. Alright. Take care. Have fun. Ye howdy.
Spark. That's cleaned up. Oh, ether. Okay, that could be good.